Hello, beautiful soul. I want to talk to you about depression. Doesn't seem like a very fun topic, but it's something that's very near and dear to my heart because I spent over 2 decades living with depression. And for most of that time, I hid it from everyone else. I was very much ashamed that despite my best efforts, my mental state was not great. I dreaded most days and had this feeling that my life was worthless, I was worthless, I just wasn't enough. And over the course of years of trying everything from psychotherapy to medication to all of the self-help techniques, it really was sort of a spiritual journey that finally led me to being free from that depression. And one of the things that I noticed in my own life, and I also noticed it in my patients, is if somewhere in our lives we got disconnected from our authentic self, our true self, then that creates this sort of tension that for some people manifests in different ways. It could manifest in anxiety. For me, it manifested in this deep sadness and this sense that my life was worthless. And what I noticed as a physician and acupuncturist running this big wellness center is I noticed many people had the same feeling. And in their past, there were different reasons for it, whether they were experiencing abuse or neglect, or they just had an emotionally distant or physically absent parent. Somehow in our childhood, some of us, not everyone, thankfully, but some of us took on this belief and started telling this story that we didn't matter. I had this ongoing sense that I wasn't enough, wasn't good enough, smart enough, whatever enough. And that belief came from certain things, being teased or being chastised or, yelled at for things. And that's normal, unfortunately, unless you have a compassionate caregiver, adult, or sibling who can kind of take you under their wing and explain that just because someone else teased you, bullied you, or yelled at you, or spanked you, doesn't mean that you're fundamentally wrong or bad or worthless. And I didn't have that to put into context the things I was experiencing as a child. And so like everyone else, based on my level of development as a tiny kid, our brain and our ego take on these coping mechanisms. And one of those coping mechanisms is to get into a very vigilant or hyper-vigilant state, always looking out for opportunities to be better, to make sure that we're accepted and make sure that we are not going to be rejected. And unfortunately, what goes along with that for me and for many of my clients is this feeling that we're just not enough. And unfortunately, it's not true. Because you are this unique, beautiful being, and you are enough. You were born into this world to fulfill your own unique destiny, and you are enough. So a lot of my work involves helping people return to the points in their lives where they took on those faulty beliefs, to put them into a new context, change them, reprogram the subconscious mind, and heal the wounds of that child, that younger, tender-hearted version of us that took on those false beliefs. And then through this reparenting, we can allow that child to grow up and be incorporated into our heart and integrated into a more adult, compassionate, mature, functioning self. So you'll see that I have developed a 5-step process called the cornerstone process that's outlined in my book, the Real Self Love Handbook. And it is a guide, it is a framework that will allow you to go through investigating who you really are, getting into healing and forgiveness for what happened in the past, taking on accountability and acceptance and love for who you really are, so that you can consciously create a life where you live who you really are. You live as your authentic self. And so all of my work is geared around that. It's really around your fundamental identity, because who you think you are and who you say you are to yourself, that whole conversation with yourself is what dictates whether you'll be successful in life, in business or relationships, and whether you will enjoy physical and emotional well-being. So welcome to my world. I do pray that we get to connect live on one of my free sessions or in person or at one of my workshops so that I can help you build more compassion, self-love, and resilience.